And now I'd like to turn to Tom Farrell, who is our scratch building layout expert, who tonight is going to show us how great he is with his electronic skills. Tom, welcome.
You're muted, Dom.
There we go. Now everybody can hear me. Well, thank you for the great introduction. And I'll try to live up to this. My last layout, some of you may be familiar with, the rustic buff and old Gothic On30 railroad, was dismantled last July because I moved. And I downsized, but my layout room is probably twice as big, so I downsized intelligently. That was a joke. And the last layout was basically analog, and it was basically a rat's nest of wiring. So this time I'm switching to DCC, and I'm going all out with it. It's about as sophisticated a DCC as you can get. There's a picture of my old Gothic railroad, the last one. The new one promises to be even better. Phil, if you go to the next page. So the idea is I'm not really compromising on anything here. If any of you have seen the last 3 programs on my new layout, I'm just taking my time. And you know, when you build a railroad, theoretically, there's an order to things. And as I said before, on my last layout, I jumped all around from half the bench work to other bench work to backdrops to wiring, just all over the place. This time I'm trying to hold to be more methodical, and it's really proving to make a great difference. We go to the next slide. There aren't any slides. Bill. So I chose to go with Digitrax principally for the layout. I need a slide.
Yeah, Phil, you stop sharing.
Zoom is not cooperating. There we go. I didn't want to show up in the share first time.
Go to the next slide.
Yep.
And then the next slide. Don't make me have to do this myself. Okay. The first thing I started with was the control cabinet. Now I got a lot of my background on DCC from YouTube. The DCC guy, Phil Puckett, I guess his name is, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I started with a 3/8 inch piece of plywood that's approximately 2 foot by almost 4 foot. I sketched out on the left there, you see, well, I painted it white. Then I sketched out the location of my, the vents, the fan, where the terminal strips will go. And you can see in the middle there where I'm working on it, cut it out. And then on the right, it's installed. So I have fans up top. I have a vent down the bottom. And I have all those power strips across the middle there, top middle. We'll go to the next slide. That's the vent. You can open and close it down the bottom. It's just a heating, ventilation, air conditioning vent out of plastic from Lowe's. But it just makes it look. All right, here's the DCC schematic for the layout. Now it looks intimidating. And as I'll go through a series of slides here in a moment, it's really not as complicated as it looks. I know it looks like a wiring for a nuclear submarine, but it really isn't that difficult. Let's go to the next slide. If you break it down into components, the very first thing I did was purchase from Digitrax a 20 amp regulated power supply, bottom left-hand corner. And that feeds a DCC Command Center. And then from England, I purchased from DCC Concepts a alpha meter. It's a volt and amp meter. And how that works is you have to hook your power from the bus from your DCC to the amp meter and then to your track. If you don't do it that way, then you don't get an accurate draw on your track for amperage. So that's actually in between the bus from the DCC Command Center and your track. I did add from DCC Specialties circuit breakers with a 2 amp trip. You can have that go from 1 amp to 5 amps. I chose 2 amps. And I have 2 power districts, as you'll see. Power district A is right off the Digital Command Center. And it feeds 2 districts. I'll take questions along the way here if anybody has any questions or comments. Anyone right now? You can unmute yourself. Okay. Then I'll show you the power district B. Go to the next slide. So sharing the 20 amp power supply is a booster. A booster is basically like a second command center. As I learned, it does not have the ability to program chips, your on board, but it feeds off of the same 20 amp power supply. Again, I have a meter in between my booster and the track. And then we go to additional circuit breakers up top there. And then I have 4 different, we'll call them districts, coming off the booster, the district B1, and then the 3 staging tracks. Additionally, for my staging, because if anybody remembers, my staging is actually hidden. I bought a Digitrax block, it says block, it's supposed to be block occupancy detector. So it will actually light up if those tracks are occupied. And so basically, you've got a single 20 amp regulated power supply feeding a digital command center and a booster, both going directly to volt amp meters, digital volt amp meters, which go directly to circuit breakers. The reason I put in circuit breakers is if you have a short on a track or some sort of derailment that your engine crosses and shorts out, you're not going to damage your encoders, your engine, or the very valuable booster or command center. We go to the next slide. Next slide, please. One of the options with Digitrax is the ability on their universal panels that are, I have 10 universal panels across the entire layout. And you can optionally hook up a 15 volt power supply to the back of those. And when you plug in a throttle, it'll actually charge the throttle up. So even though I'm going to use wireless throttles, they're going to have batteries in them. I thought it'd be a good idea to have the ability to charge those wireless throttles at will with the 10 universal panels I have distributed across the layout. So that's a separate power supply. And if you'll notice, the colors on my drawing here aren't just for art's sake. That actually matches the colors on the layout, so it's easy to troubleshoot. And at a glance, I can tell whether it's the bus, the DC power for the charging unit, or as you'll see, the 12 volt accessory charging. Next, please. Oh, we're going real fast. Back one, please. I decided to put in a 12 volt transformer to power my tortoise machines or any accessories or LEDs or lighting I may have scattered around the layout. This is all pre-wired into the layout. It's really easy to wire this stuff in now without having crawl underneath the layout. I think we skipped a slide, but basically my command center and booster feed a wireless Digitrax radio. So my throttles are wireless. I have 2 of them at the moment. I have what's called a super throttle, which is gives you the ability to program your encoders. And then I have a less expensive, simpler throttle, the Digitrax UT6D. Anyway, it's just a smaller, more simple throttle. I envision having a bunch of those if I ever have a layout session, and just a couple of the more complicated throttles. Okay, now let's see if we go to the next slide. This is, oh, you're going to quill to parchment here. This is the back of that control panel that I built. You can see all the red and blue are the bus wires for the layout, the DC bus wires. The orange and brown is the panel charging wires for the 10 plugins distributed along the layout. The yellow and green, those wires just run throughout the layout. If I need 12 volts for my Tortoise machines, it's already in place. And then the black is the plug-in RJ12 cable. So if you look in the upper right, the RJ12 is very similar to the old style phone wires. The 12-volt accessories are green and yellow, just like my drawing. The DCC bus wires are twisted together. That's to eliminate any RFID or any fields generated by the waveform coming off the AC, basically the AC that rides atop that. It's a square wave. I don't want to get into it, but basically the square wave that runs across DC. And then there's my just DC throttle wires, the orange and brown. If you look at my photograph in the upper right hand, go back the other way. If you look at the upper right hand corner of the box, you'll see the Digitrax logo. That's that wireless unit. They recommend you put that in the central area of your layout so you get equal distribution in the room. I don't think it's a big problem. My room's only 35 feet, but this control box panel is basically located in the middle of the layout. Okay. Oh boy. First day with the new hands, Phil.
It's just really sensitive. It doesn't change and then it hits it again. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Just kidding. So these are the circuit breakers. They light up like a Christmas tree. I have everything connected to terminals inside the box and outside. So for troubleshooting purposes, or if I have to replace something, things aren't, quote, hardwired. It takes more time to do it this way. But at some point in the future, I think it's going to pay off, because if I have to replace one of these boards, it's not directly hardwired to the layout. There's terminals in between, and for troubleshooting purposes. So I actually have 7 circuit breakers. I had to add one up in the side. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of the main photograph, you'll see that little one up there. I also designed this particular circuit breaker board to roll on rollers, door rollers. So this is actually sticking out of the the front of the control box for troubleshooting purposes. I don't have to stick my head in a box to unscrew anything or fix something. Next slide. Yeah, this is the front of the control box. You can see my array of, I'll show you exactly what those voltmeters are and what they do up there. You can see how the thing lights up really nice. I put a glass door on there like an old style stereo cabinet. You see in the first photograph, the middle is that sort of massive 20 amp power supply. To the left is the booster, to the left is the command center, to the right is the booster. Down the bottom is, let's go across the top here. I'll and then I have close-ups of these, but basically those are voltmeters in the first panel. The second panel is that Digitrax plug-in that I was referring to. They also have an LED in there. So my main line, let you know if you have power to your main line or wherever you hook it up to, but all of my 10 Digitrax plug-in panels are, the LED option on there is hooked up to the main line. So if I have juice to the main line, that LED's on. That little toggle switch to the left of that panel there is for the programming track that's on my layout. It's just a siding. It can be used as a main line, run with the DCC system, or if you flip the switch, it's isolated and it's a programming track. The light switch there is not a low grade 99-cent light switch. That's a 20 amp switch that turning it on and off turns all this stuff on and off. All my little transformers, my big 20 amp power pack, all this stuff. One flick, when I'm done playing with trains, I just flick it off and off everything goes. Okay. Next slide. This is a close-up of the back side of the layout. This isn't what you just looked at. So the bottom three are just close-ups of what you're seeing across the top. So that digital on the left there is a voltmeter and amp meter. I got that from England. It really only took a couple of weeks to get. There were 3 of them that I looked at, 2 in the States, and this one looked the cleanest and was competitively priced. And like I say, you have to hook this up in between your track or you don't get the advantage of how many amps you're drawing off the layout. And then the green, I chose all different colors that make sense to me. This is a 12 volt accessory power supply telling me that I do in fact have 12 volts for my Tortoise machines and any LED lighting. And then this universal panel, this for the LocoNet system, has a built-in LED, has built-in charging if you use those options. I've got 10 of these across the layout. They're really easy to wire. And the way I designed the layout, I'll show you a little later, but I left this, I don't know, 4 or 5 inch gap between the fascia on the layout and my base cabinets that I built. And I can just insert all kinds of electronics, panels, and I think it looks pretty professional, you know. Next one.
I agree.
Pardon me?
I agree. I think it looks fantastic.
So here's the front of the layout. The right below this is that cabinet. So again, I've labeled everything. So the if you look at the enlargement photo on the bottom left, that voltmeter, and those voltmeters were $20 from a company called PowerX in California. So they're relatively inexpensive, but they look like something out of Star Trek. So I generously use them. That tells me that my 20 amp power supply is putting out 16.5 volts. So I know it's working. And I know when it runs through the digital command center or well, this happens to be the digital command center. On the other side of the layout's the booster. This tells me to the track, I have 14.6 volts going to the track at all time because it's DCC. You always have a voltage to the track. And I'm drawing 0.21 amps, even though there's nothing on the layout. So it must be all the other junk I have on the layout. The bottom right, the red numbers is telling me I have 14.7 volts going to that LocoNet charger, which you see on the right. So if you plug in one of my wireless throttles or a wired throttle and it has rechargeable batteries, and that light is on, I know that I have 14.7 volts going to that recharge. It was only $20. It looks like you cut a 1 1/8 inch hole. In fact, the drill bit costs more than the damn power, the analog digital display. And then the toggle switch there is for my programming track. I have 2 programming tracks, one on each side of the layout. In the run position, you're on the DCC bus. It has the center off. So if you want to place a locomotive on the programming track, you have it in the off position. Then you switch it up to program. Now you take your wireless throttle or your wired throttle that's capable of programming an encoder, and you don't have to encode, you don't have to program on the bench. I have 2 tracks on the layout that are basically sidings that have a dual function. They're either a siding or they're a programming track.
Mm.
And then moving across the top of the top photograph, there's that 20 amp industrial grade light switch, turns everything on and off. And then the 12 volt digital voltmeter that's telling me I have 12 volts accessories on a separate power supply from all the other stuff, giving me power for my tortoise machines.
Tom, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 programming tracks that you have,
Mm-hmm.
they tie in directly to your layout, right?
Yeah, they're just like an industrial siding.
So when you have it on programming and you finish programming, can you just run the locomotive then just
Right
onto your-
off, right on the layout. Yep.
and just keeps going?
Yep. It's just like you got it programmed, gave it an address. You switch it from that's a toggle switch, center off, double pull, double throw, toggle switch. You just go from program to off to run, and now you're on the main system.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yep. Next one. This is an overview of how that reason my layout's taking so long is I'm a cabinet maker, I guess, amongst my other skills. Not really, but I'm making all these cabinets below the layout. And you can see the integrated cabinet there lit up like a Christmas tree. That's my DCC system. And see those gaps in the upper, right below the fascia. When I'm done putting in my electronics, I'm going to put in white blank off boards just so the thing looks pretty, if you will. But for now, they're open because for example, as an afterthought, added that green 12 volt digital voltmeter there. And it was just the way I have this designed is I can keep adding things, and it looks integrated, looks well planned, but really it's just flexibility and design. So I can just keep adding things. Like if I want to add a control panel for my tortoise machines, and I'm going to use those touch controls. Jim mentioned earlier, we're going to have that manufacturer on the program in March. I spoke to him personally 2 days ago about my layout because it's going to require a lot of his equipment. I just wanted to talk to him about it, but I will include where those gaps are below the fascia and my cabinet. I'll have a control panel in there, and it'll have those touch controls because I think they look cool and they capacitive discharge. You'll see they're pretty neat stuff. And yeah, so I don't think there's any more slides. I think that's it. So if there's any question, oh yeah, there's okay. Any questions from anybody? Surely there's one.
I have a question.
Okay.
For the DC 12 volt, what did you use?
I bought from an electronics supply house. I bought a 12 volt power supply, and then I had to wire the 110 volts to it, and then I had to just run 2 wires off the 12 volt to it.
Okay.
And I mounted it to the inside wall of the my control cabinet, and yeah, it was like $20 or something like that.
It wasn't any special brand, was it?
No, it was just
Okay.
I have it in the book. I could tell you what it is in 2 seconds if you want to know.
No, that's okay, but
Yeah.
I know where to look.
Yeah, yeah, it's right behind me. You can't. Here, I'll get it. Hold on. It's just a make a liar out of me. Got everything so organized, but that's not in there. Well, I'll figure it out for next time. I'll have the name of it, but it was relatively inexpensive, $20 or so.
Tom,
Thank you.
thank you so very much. I mean, you've really covered a lot of material tonight, and obviously it's going to be a beautiful operation once you get it finished.
Thank you. Yep.